guys.
Howdy.
Stand back.
Welcome back to Dion Talk.
How you doing?
Who's heading on to? Oh, reference to. I just
Yes.
said it. Sorry.
There you go. We need you to ask that question later.
Sorry, I can't believe I asked. So,
If you haven't.
close, just like that last panel, you know, you saw that one guy that
Right.
once in a while would try to answer
Right.
a question with the navel mic.
Right. Yeah.
You know, put it on your chin and then pull it out about an inch.
Sure.
There's about a 1 count between the time you flip the switch and it actually starts.
Funny thing is, it's already live.
Sweet.
Is that turn?
Did you?
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Howdy, everybody. Who is this Dion guy? We are live at the Northwest Action Summit. Millennial Mike and I are about to do our presentation. And, of course, Kurt thinks I'm 7 feet tall. Only Mike is.
There you go. You gotta flip it on when we're ready to go.
Okay.
Is everybody ready? Have some fun. We're going to take a photo. But we need you to look. Trevor.
Bueller.
Yeah, right.
We're going to do things. Everybody stand up and switch seats. Yeah, Christian, we're going to just sat down. You're going to get to know a few other people in this room right now. Stand
Musical
up.
chairs.
I'm not good. Stand up.
Musical chairs. Out of your comfort zones.
Pick your stuff up. Move. Yeah, land.
My brother David is in the audience, and he's absolutely terrified that I'm going to make him come up here and talk.
Oh man. Well, unfortunately, Dividend Dave's probably not in the chat because he's actually here. So we'll have to rely on Hyder and Chester Williams.
To do all the chat.
Yeah.
Give you a little idea of what we got going on here. We're playing musical chairs. Next is musical clothes.
Musical
Close.
chairs. Oh God. Yikes. Yeah.
I'm out.
Find your seat, sit back down, we got some great stuff coming. You guys ready for the photo? We need to do something fun. Everybody say 18%.
18%.
I could do the whistle thing, but it would kill everybody on YouTube.
Yeah.
All right, hopefully the sound is working on both mics.
Marina, Dave, and Dave did not move.
Nope,
We ain't playing that game.
that's funny.
Are you guys ready? You guys ready to hear Mike and Dion? We need to quiet down so they can start. And they are live on Facebook,
YouTube.
on YouTube. We're all on YouTube right now.
So that one guy's who said his wife doesn't know he's here, he probably doesn't want us on it. But-
Yeah, right. Don't dime him out.
Okay. Howdy. All right, sorry on YouTube, I'm gonna have to do this.
Oof.
Did it work?
It's
It worked.
authoritative.
Okay. How's everybody doing? So the reason Mike and I are presenting today is because I want to show that there is a spectrum when it comes to investing. You're going to hear people like Cody and Christian talk later, and Mike talk, that are what I call motivated hard chargers. They are growing a massive portfolio using very creative ways to invest in real estate. I'm on the other end of that spectrum. I'm actually called the lazy investor. If there was a lazy way to do anything, I'm the one who will develop the system to make it work. So first we're going to tell you a little bit about where we're at now, because if we tell you our origin story first, what I've found is that kind of depresses people, and that's not the goal. But we want to share that too, so that you can understand you can come from, like Jesse, kind of a bad place and get to a better place. So this is Millennial Mike. And what year did you start investing?
I bought my first rental property in 2018.
Okay. Give us a little bit about where you were at in where you're at now.
Where I'm at now?
Let's start with where we're at now so we get to the good stuff and starting with all of the
Sure.
challenges.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Mike Newton. I hate when people call me Millennial Mike. I didn't know when I made a YouTube channel 5 years ago and just cleverly thought, oh yeah, Millennial Mike, that people were going to introduce me as that forever. It's obnoxious. Just call me Mike. Like some of you, I'm a recovering Dave Ramsey addict. Didn't know you needed credit to buy real estate because that's not what Uncle Dave said. But you do. You do. Certainly helps. Ask those lenders that were up here earlier. But yeah, so right now I own properties in the Midwest. I invest at a distance. I started by house hacking in the Seattle area, which I think everybody should start doing because you got to live somewhere and it cuts down your living expenses. But then I said, it really sucks to have to save 20% for a down payment on an $800,000 duplex. That takes a lot of time. And I was like, wow, look at these numbers in the Midwest where properties are $50,000 or $100,000. Wouldn't it be nice if I could figure out how to invest there? But I didn't know exactly how to start. That's kind of what my story is about, how I started building a portfolio out there. But where I'm at right now is 1 triplex, 2 duplexes, 7 single family homes, and I just got a 4-unit building under contract like 2 or 3 days ago in the Midwest. So it is possible to invest at a distance. I bought these houses. I never went there before I bought them. I never saw them. I did the entire thing virtually from my phone or computer. I have been there twice now. Dion and I went out there wearing full body armor, strapped and ready to go, because I invest in Gary, Indiana, which I affectionately call Gotham City. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So back to you.
Right. So Mike works in law enforcement. He's a single parent and he's investing at a distance, but currently house hacking in a high cost of living area. I also invest in a high cost of living area. We're both near Seattle, but not in Seattle. So when he said he highly recommends people do that, what he meant was the house hack, not moving to Seattle.
Agreed, 100%.
So to explain the different strategies, I invest locally because you're going to hear a lot of investors talk about how do you pick a market. And whenever somebody brings up how do you pick a market, you'll usually hear this list. Is the population growing or shrinking? Are there economic drivers? What is the crime statistics? You can go to uhaul.com and track where are their trucks moving to and where they're moving from. That's everything that everyone lists, and everyone skips the most important thing. The one metric that lets you pick a market. It's not yield, it's not crime, it's not population. It is trusted boots on the ground. If you heard of a market right now that had a great yield, great crime statistics, population was growing, and you call there and you say, I have Seattle money and I want to invest there, those agents are going to send you deals that look better than anything you've ever heard of, that every single local investor passed on, for a reason you won't know until you own it. So for Mike to invest at a distance, talk a little bit about how you landed on your market.
Yeah, so Gary, Indiana. Yeah, you Google it and you're like, oh my God, I gotta wipe my server on my computer. This is pretty bad. 3 times the national poverty rate, 3 times the national crime rate, 13,000 abandoned buildings. As I said, Batman frequently visits the area to beat up criminals. It's pretty bad. And when someone suggested it to me, I said, heck no, absolutely not. No way, not gonna happen, because I can use a computer. And a friend of mine, so another fellow law enforcement officer, Dion's a cop, I'm still a cop. Another friend of mine, his name is Mark, he was investing on the East Coast. He had owned a triplex, owned a house, a couple other houses in Alabama. He was like, I'm investing in Indiana. Mike, you should do it too. And that's when I Googled it and said, you're insane. Nicer than that, because I don't want to offend him, but. And then he just kept annoying me and bugging, and he wouldn't leave me alone. Mark's a little socially like that. He just doesn't know how to be like, bro, no, I'm not doing it. Anyways, so he keeps messaging me over and over again, and I watch him buy his first rental in Gary, and then his third, and then his 5th, and then his 15th, all the way up to 25. And at some point you say to yourself, I can't just keep saying it's stupid when you're not having any of the problems I thought you were going to have, and I'm not even taking the time to do the research to learn anything about the market beyond just a quick Google search. And that's where one of my favorite phrases comes from, which is at any geographical location, anywhere in the country, in any market, there are people who are investing successfully and people who are not investing successfully. So you find the ones who are doing it right and you copy them. A lot of people right now are stressed out. It's 2023, interest rates suck, it's not as good as it was. Well, just like at any place in the market, at any time in the market, there's people who are investing successfully and people who are investing not. Cody's gonna talk to you later about all the seller financing stuff. Guess what? He doesn't care what interest rates are. Neither should you. Neither do I, because I do seller financing. So I got over my initial response. Again, as a cop, you look up the crime statistics and you're like, bro, I'm gonna have my brethren responding to my units all the time, and I don't want that. But once you find the right boots on the ground, which as Dion mentioned is the #1 metric you need, somebody that you know and trust. It's not your property manager, it's not agents, it's not wholesalers, it's a network of other investors in the area who you can ask questions of, get referrals from. What areas should I buy in? What type of property should I buy in? What type of tenants should I lease to? Those are the people who will guide you to success.
And so using the friendship of another investor to use their trusted boots on the ground was a way to get a market where it's not in the high cost of living area that Mike is at. I chose to invest in the high cost of living area for a couple of reasons. One, I can't stress enough how being the lazy investor is the strongest motivation that there is out there. I grew up with a family of tree surgeons. So my brother owned a tree service, my brother still owns a tree service, my dad owned one. I joined the Marine Corps because it was easier than tree work. You have to be really lazy to join the Marine Corps because that's easier than what your family's doing. I tried for a pension 3 times. The Marine Corps downsized after Desert Storm, so my career path changed without my control. I was in law enforcement for about 8 years when the 2008 housing recession crash happened, and when there's no tax money coming in, police departments lay off because when there's a recession, there's no more crime, so we don't need cops anymore. After leaving the police department, I went to truck driving for Oak Harbor Freight Lines and basically doubled my income from law enforcement to truck driving. So they went on strike. So the 3 different ways I could have got a pension got taken away with me having no control, and I thought, I'm going to have to create my own pension. Now my brother has 10 paid off rentals, and I thought he was insane. He ran a tree service and he bought rentals, so he would work 10 to 15 hours a day in his business and then 5 hours at night rehabbing these. He was like doing basically a burr without the refinance at the end. And he did it over and over and over. And then when he turned 50, because I thought he was crazy, he was working 17 hours a day. Like, what's the point? But he turns 50, shuts down his business, all 10 rentals are paid off and fully producing cash flow. And now for 8 years, he's just traveled the world and done whatever he wants. And a little light bulb went on saying, I can do something like that. But if you invest in Gary, Indiana, the cash flow from each property is somewhere between $200 and $600 around. So to reach the cash flow numbers that I would need, it would take 15, 20, 30, 40 units. So I started investing outside of Seattle in the Tacoma area of Washington. And my current portfolio is 16 rental units that produce a little over $17,000 a month in pure cash flow. I retired last year, and now I've spent a year with my brother basically doing whatever I want, going wherever I can. And the idea is I wanted, and I'm going to steal a page right out of that ADU guy's playbook, the least number of units with the highest cash flow. So I've never done a rehab. I've never done a HELOC. I've never done a cash out refinance. I've never taken out a second mortgage. I've never sold a property at 1031. I've never done all of the creative things that some of the people that were talking today have done. My strategy has to work for somebody. Before I retired, I was working full time, raising 3 kids. When I got laid off from law enforcement, I went through a divorce and I found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name that I didn't know existed until the divorce. When I started, after getting laid off from Oak Harbor Freight Lines, I started teaching people how to drive trucks making $17 an hour. So I had a really low income, really bad debt to income ratio. I didn't have equity to do what my brother did. He took out a HELOC, purchased a property, rehabbed it, paid off the HELOC, and repeated it until he had 10. So getting started was challenging. I didn't have a friend like Mark Matsky investing in another area to piggyback on and buy properties at an affordable price to me. Didn't have the cash flow or capital to do it. So I figured my one way to get into this was house hacking. So Mike and I are actually still house hacking. I've only house hacked twice. I'm living in a 4-plex right now. I'm getting paid $2,500 a month to live where I do. That's very addicting. Hard to break that strategy or that habit. And everybody says, some people that I know have said, you have the ability to go and buy $1 million house. Why don't you? Bless you. And I said, the reason I have the ability to buy $1 million house is because I haven't. I purchased a duplex. It took 2 years to save the down payment for that duplex to move in. It was 2 years till I got the next rental property, and I bought another duplex that wasn't a house hack. The thing that's really hard to explain, especially when you hear some of the younger speakers say, I have this many rental units in this many months, As an average person working a W-2 income, raising kids, kind of trying to still have a life, saving the down payment to buy one rental every couple of years doesn't sound like it's not sexy. It's very boring. And to me, because it took 10 years, first duplex 2 years, next duplex 2 years, then the income snowball starts to happen. So one of the reasons I stayed in a high cost of living area is because each unit of my rentals produces about $1,000 a month in cash flow. So I'm self-managing 16 rental units and it takes me less than 2 hours a month. Self-managing doesn't sound lazy, but when you get the systems in place, so I have a question. As an investor, because I'm always curious, who do you think is the most important person on your team if you self-manage properties? Some people will say your agent for the next deal, the lender, those relationships. For me, the most important person when you self-manage, handyman. There you go, see? I have at least 3 that I will hire for jobs I can easily do myself. Simple jobs, overpay them. Because I'm lazy. So that when I get that call at 11 o'clock at night, it doesn't come to me. It goes through Hemlane, it's dispatched to my handyman, they handle it on a difficult, go into crawl space, fix the problem thing because I hired them for the easy jobs. So when it comes to picking your market, you have to think of what is your goal. If your goal is to grow a huge portfolio at a distance because you don't want to invest in a high cost of living area, it's kind of like Dave Ramsey has that debt snowball. Focus on the smallest debt paid off because you get the dopamine hit of closing on the property. You've been investing now for 5 years. Your portfolio has more units than mine does. I've been investing twice as long. So mine doesn't have the speed. We have to save up about the same amount of money, but his entire cash purchase is the same price as my down payment. But less units, higher cash flow. I want to do something really quick that's a little bit out of talking about real estate. There are a couple of people here who I've talked to who are kind of just starting out, have that first property under their belt, so they've actually taken action. And I have a couple of books here. If anybody's heard of Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time, this is actually his first book that came out.
He's a YouTube channel you should follow. He's got almost 200 rental units, 20 years of experience in California. He's a stud. And yeah, this book is like a #1 seller on Amazon. It's pretty good.
Caden. Where's Caden sitting?
Congrats.
The one we sat with last night. Yeah, Caden, sorry. At least your name wasn't John and there's like 6 guys stand up. Sorry. There you go. Good job getting started. So, after picking a market, you kind of have to think about what strategy you're going to use. And I'm trying to express that there is a spectrum of what we're doing here. All of my deals are from the MLS. No seller financing, no mailers, no driving for dollars. Everything is just auto searches set up with agents. And I pluralize that. They know that there's more than one. All of my loans are conventional loans from a regular lender. Slow growth without recycling capital. Explain to me how you have recycled capital, because this is one of the biggest differences in our strategies other than added distance. Talk about the ways, because you've almost done every version of it that I've heard.
Yeah, I've purchased off the MLS. I've purchased from a turnkey provider, and a turnkey property is a rent-ready property with a tenant in it already. I've purchased from a wholesaler. I've done the BRRRR strategy 3 times. I'm about to do it for a 4th time. I've done seller financing. I've used a home equity line of credit on my first duplex to buy a property, remodel it, cash out with a BRRRR strategy, pay back the HELOC, buy another one, do it again, buy another one, do it again. And so when we actually did the math, the grand total amount of my actual dollars that I have used to buy properties was only $82,000. And I've got 10 different properties, and it'll be like 17 units when I close on this next one. Because if you do recycle capital, it makes the process a lot easier to not have to come up with that 20% down payment over and over and over again.
And I'm at the opposite end of that, of having not done any of that. Everything is just from the MLS with a conventional loan. There's this thing called the real estate X factor. However much risk you're willing to take, you could make more money. However much more work you're willing to do, you could make more money. So think of that X factor. If you self-manage short-term rentals, that you got with creative financing, you have the chance at making the most money. When you add property management, midterm, long-term, you start making less and less money, but it's taking less and less work. So the ability to get all of my cash flowing rentals from the MLS comes from a strategy that I have. And I was getting ready to retire. So I retired last year. Mike is about, I want to say, a little more than a third of the way to financial freedom. It's going to hit the income snowball. So I would figure in 2 to 3 years, Mike will be retiring too. And since Mike's on the SWAT team, he's been shot at 3 or 4 times this year. So we're all looking forward to him not having that job anymore.
That's why I actually bought in Gary, Indiana. I was like, you know, how am I going to continue my need for having bullets coming my way? I'll invest in Gary. There we go.
And no kidding, true story. We go to Gary, Indiana. We're touring his entire portfolio. And I made a short because there's a bullet hole through the peephole in the door of the rental he's getting fixed. So of course I make a short, I pick on him because we're friends. We get home. I own a fourplex in Spanaway, Washington. While we're gone, a bullet comes through the wall, goes through 6 of my shirts and into the closet. So I can't pick on you about Gary, Indiana anymore. Spanaway might not be the best place to invest too. The reason I'm able to find cash flowing rentals on the MLS is because I was getting close to retire and I was afraid. I had fear that it takes me about $4,000 a month to live pretty comfortably even when I'm traveling because I'm house hacking, living for free. And cash flow was passing $12,000, $14,000, $16,000 a month, and I felt kind of dumb going to work because I had 3 or 4 times my freedom number coming in without having to get out of bed. But we've all heard stories of somebody who used to own rentals. And I thought, so if I retire and my cash flows from my rentals, what if I decide I don't want to own rentals anymore? What could happen that would make me not want to? So I started going around and talking to all of the investors I know, and it's really hard to find somebody who used to, because in our circle, watching BiggerPockets and the one rental at a time community, it's people trying to grow a portfolio. So we're all kind of gung-ho about it. And then I found them. I found in the Choose FI groups, the financial independence groups, they're mostly into stocks. You mention real estate, you almost get kicked out of the group. So there are stock investors, and a lot of them never invested in real estate or tried it and failed. And some failed because, death in the family, divorce, birth, change of job, something where they just couldn't handle it. But across the board, almost every single landlord that used to own rentals, that thing I was afraid that might happen if I retired and might go back to work because I'm lazy and I don't want to work. Across the board, every single landlord that said, I used to own rentals, even Stephan, it's a big YouTube channel. He got his start with real estate, and now he's bigger on YouTube. But he sold some rentals because he made this mistake. He put out a video that says, yeah, I had to sell 3 of my rentals out of 7 because I would make more money in a savings account than I was making on those rentals because for 10 years, Graham didn't raise the rent. Every single investor that I talked to that had all of the other issues, right, they could have something else in their life, but consistently, I didn't want to lose a good tenant, so I didn't raise the rent. So if you go into any of the financial groups and you say, just ask in Facebook, I have a tenant, I really like them, they're a good tenant, I want to raise the rent, how do I do it? You will see people who've never owned a rental spout off, comment, don't raise the rent, you'll lose a good tenant. So I came up with a strategy. The reason I got invited on BiggerPockets, which is episode 448, is because I have a strategy that gets my tenants to ask me to raise the rents. If you buy a property and you raise the rents about $100, you're kind of a jerk. They'll flame you on social media, your tenant can get angry and they might leave. They might stay, but then they're angry. So with my strategy, the tenants ask me to raise the rent, usually somewhere between $300 to $450 a month, and then thank me when I agree. Happy tenants don't leave, and happy tenants don't trash your property. This strategy is called the binder method. So I'm not going to cover it today because I want to get to questions if we have it, but I'll cover the basics of it. Any questions on it, I will cover. But if you go to diontalk.com, that's D-I-O-N, diontalk.com, there are 3 options there. One of them is a free course, so there's no fee. All the ways that you use the binder strategy to get your tenants to ask you to raise the rent, thank you when you agree, increase your cash flow, lower your turnover rate, works with Section 8, works with property management, works locally, works at a distance. Most times when you look at the MLS, you'll see rents that are below average. That's why they're selling. It's usually a tired landlord that doesn't want to take care of it. So what most owners will do is they'll buy a property, they prefer to buy it vacant. I don't. That means work, rehab, screen, place, educate the new tenant. I want to buy properties with tenants in place because I'm confident that they're going to ask me to raise the rent. So far, I haven't had it not happen once. There's a person in the back here that came here from Florida, Dividend Dave. No, not Florida, Tennessee.
North Carolina.
God dang. Louisiana, who purchased a duplex. He lived in Bellingham. He purchased a duplex in, where again?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. I only talk to you every week. I don't know why I don't know that. Is here from North Carolina. So if you come up here, Dave. Purchased his duplex, used the strategy, and I'm going to have you on YouTube for 30 seconds. Tell us the numbers on what was the rent when you purchased the property.
So when I purchased the property, the rent was $620.
$620?
$620.
Okay, and after you use the binder strategy, what are the rents now?
The rents will be $850 July 1st.
By having a conversation, thank you, Dave, by having a conversation with his tenants that took less than probably 20 minutes, putting the information together probably took about 10, able to buy a duplex from the MLS that will now cash flow. Anything else you want to cover before we turn it over to questions?
Yeah, so I think sometimes we really minimize the wins that we have, and it's very important to be okay with setting goals and setting some small goals. You know, you can aim low. That doesn't mean don't aim, but just being here is an accomplishment for some people. Some people don't like to be in groups, don't like to get out of their comfort zone. So just being here is a major accomplishment for some people. Buying your first house hack, but constantly referring to yourself as just a little baby investor and I haven't done anything cool. Like, you don't understand the thousands of people that message me and Dion on Instagram and YouTube who have nothing, no money, no real estate. They've got nothing. They don't even know anything yet. They haven't even been watching videos long enough yet. So don't minimize your successes. It's good to put a win on the board and then recognize it as a win, because that's going to help your win snowball get bigger in your favor. And then I guess the last thing I would say is I love to talk about buying cheap cash flowing rental properties out of state and at a distance. And it's a freaking awesome program that I put together where you can get some really good cash flow and it's not that expensive. But there is another side to that coin, because it's a double-edged sword. You can go broke buying cheap. So yeah, it's really cool when I say I bought a $60,000 house with a $350 mortgage payment and it rents for $1,200 a month. We can all do the math on that. That sounds great, but not every $60,000 house is the $60,000 house you should buy. So that's where the trusted boots on the ground come in. So I don't want it to be false advertising like, yeah, just go pull up Gary, Indiana and just, oh, this one's $30,000, sweet. No. There's a reason why there's so many crappy properties in some of these states like Iowa and Ohio and Alabama and Oklahoma. You've got to know the right type of asset. But when you find it, it's really powerful. So.
Okay, and before we get to questions, I want to wrap up with a mindset shift that can change the way you look at investing. This mindset shift cost me a decade. I literally lost a decade of investing I would have done. I made it to 40 without ever having $1,000 in the bank because I looked at money the wrong way. I talked about my brother having 10 paid off rentals using his home equity line of credit to get them. He's a craftsman. He'd go in, he'd do the rehab himself mostly, then he'd pay off the HELOC. He's been retired with 10 paid off rentals, over $12,000 a month in cash flow to just go do whatever he wants. And something he said, one sentence, maybe two, stopped me from investing for 10 years. He said, every time I buy a property, in 6 years, I think when he started he said 11 years, but he's got it down to 6 now. He says, in 6 years, I have my money back. But here's how I interpreted it. That's dumb. You have your money. You're going to give it to someone else for 6 years so you can get your money back? And that thought stopped me from investing until one day this epiphany hit me. He still had his money. He didn't spend anything to buy his properties. He moved money. So every rental that I've purchased, I haven't spent anything. I take the $100,000 that's in the bank, or when I started it was $15,000 for that first duplex house hack, and I took it from the bank and I put it in the property, it's still there. It's still mine. I can sell, I can 1031, I can cash out refinance, I could take out a home equity line of credit, I could leave the equity in the building and enjoy the cash flow, but it's still my money sitting there. When you buy an investment property, you are not spending money. You are moving it. It's still there. It's still yours. And the last thing I want to wrap up with, which is a little bit petty, is I want to explain my shirt. It comes from a little bit of something my dad said when I was a kid. And I talk about my parents often. I miss my mom and I miss my dad. But my dad told me that the best revenge, this is one of the only advices that you can say publicly from my dad, but he said the best revenge is to live a happy life. Right? So with that in mind, this shirt is from my favorite movie. It is called The Count of Monte Cristo. And it is a book written by Alexander Dumas. He did the Three Musketeers and the Iron Mask and all those kind of books. Great book. But the book is about a person who becomes so wealthy they can dedicate the entire remaining years of their life to revenge. And that is so beautiful. But then you couple that with what my dad said, and that the best revenge is living a happy life. If you reach financial freedom and you get to do anything you want, and you learn the two things that I realized right away, as soon as I retired, day of the week doesn't matter. I kind of expected that. Every day is Saturday. But the second thing I didn't expect is time of day doesn't matter. So many people are convinced, because we went through school, then we worked Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day, that there is a time where you sleep, a time where you're awake. The whole world opens up to you when you're financially free, and you don't have to work, you don't have to invest. Work becomes optional. You can still work. I'm too lazy, but you might want to still work. The world is completely different to where you can build the happy life that you want, which almost has nothing to do with money. It's that you've removed money as a problem so that you can do all of the other things. So we have a few minutes for questions, if there are any. Or so the question is, I said last night that I invest in 4 doors or less. There is a very specific reason, and like I said, a spectrum of investors. And residential lending is 4 units or less, and newsflash, if you're a veteran, it's 5 units or less. VA loans will do 5 units or less. But I like 30-year fixed rate debt. There are, like I said, a spectrum of ways to invest, but I like to fire off a mortgage, never think of it again, no adjustable rate, this is the deal breaker for me, no loan reevaluation period. The pain that we're seeing right now in large multifamily that's going to create all of those deals that people that want to invest in that asset class can scoop up is because they have adjustable rate. They're going to have a loan reevaluation period when they might not have the net operating income to justify the loan, so they have a few options. They can try to refinance, which now rates have doubled. They can write a multiple 6-figure check to keep the property, or they can sell it probably at a loss. So that's what keeps me, the lazy investor, in 4 units or less. Originally, I wanted to buy single family, one house, live in it for a year, move to another one, live in it for a year, and just cycle through until I had the 10 rentals like my brother. But in my area, I have not, in over a decade, ever seen a single family house that would cash flow. So duplexes, I have 4 of them, then a triplex, and a 4plex, and all of them cash flow. So that's why I stay 4 units or less. It's because of the debt structure. Question is, do you pay off mortgages? Yes, but I let the tenants do it. I made a mistake. Do you have any paid off properties?
Technically, yes, because when I do a burst strategy, I pay in cash. But my intention is to do a cash out refinance on the back end at the new value.
So I made a huge mistake in 2015. If you remember, after the housing crash, lenders' fear was a lot higher. So you were limited to 4 mortgages in your name. Now it's 10, right? 10 conventional loans in your line. If you're married, you can be 10 each, right? So in 2015-16, I got to 4. And I had my house that I lived in before I was an investor was my smallest loan, highest interest rate. So I focused and paid it off. I consider that to be a mistake, because the money that I used to pay off that mortgage would have purchased another small multifamily that cash flows more than that paid off house does. So instead of thinking paid off property, I think equity position. So as I was growing and scaling my business, my real estate portfolio, I wanted to be at least around 70% loan to value of the whole portfolio. That way I'm gaining appreciation on a large enough multiple of what I've invested, and I have a buffer of at least 30% of the equity. So if something happens, I like to invest like rents could drop, even though, and you can Google this, most investors always tell me that that can't be real. Since we've started tracking the data on rents, they have never once ever gone down market-wide. There are local markets. The car manufacturers moved out of Detroit. The dot-com crash hits the Silicon Valley, so some places they can crash. But market-wide, they've never gone down. In any 5-year period, they've always gone up. I invest like I expect rents to go down 50%. That's how lazy I am. I don't want to go back to work. So paying off a property to me wouldn't matter as I was growing up, scaling the portfolio. Once I retired and I quit the W-2, I shifted my equity position. I want about 50% equity so I can even handle a bigger rent decrease if I had to, which we've never seen, and still not have to go back to work.
I didn't hear it in your conversation, but did you say that you have long-term rentals as all your property?
Yes, all my properties are long-term rentals. I think all of yours are long-term rentals. Since I'm 100% real estate with no retirement accounts, no stocks, no crypto, and I don't want to work, I diversify my portfolio in 2 ways. First I want all long-term because I'm lazy. I talk to the tenants every year or every other year if that. I try to do 2-year leases. And you have to know in your market if you have a lease longer than 12 months, in most places, tenant signature has to be notarized. So that's one shift for longer leases. But I keep my properties at least 10 miles apart so that they're pulling from different economic drivers, like a base, a port, a college, a hospital, Boeing, Amazon, something where, you know, if Boeing moves out of Washington, I'll lose maybe 1 or 2 tenants. Then I diversify my tenant type. I keep about 1/3 military, 1/3 Section 8, and 1/3 working or retired. So a pandemic, prolonged government shutdown, stock market crash, again, hits 1 or 2 of my tenants, not all 16. And anytime I bring that up, I always want to clarify and say, you can't advertise. Section 8 only. Military only, right? You get a discrimination, something against you. But you can control how you advertise. If I have a rental coming up and my percentage of how many Section 8 tenants I want is a little low, I get the listing, I send it to the counselors at the housing authority, and I say, this listing comes out Tuesday, can you let your clients know? If I want a military person and I call the base and I advertise with the housing authority on base, who do you think I'm gonna get? So I keep that ratio so that I'm diversified. Giving me that, I call it the swan, you can sleep well at night, retirement way, so I know I will never have to go back to work unless I somehow went crazy and wanted to. Other questions?
I wanted to say something about, because we talked earlier about interest rates and putting 20% down. If you're not taking the time to learn about creative financing and seller financing right now, you're doing yourself a massive disservice. It's very hard to get a cash flowing deal with a 7.5% interest rate when the property is still priced at the prices when it was a 3.5% interest rate. And the sellers don't want to budge, and who could blame them? Because if we were selling, would we budge? No, you'd only sell if you had to. But there's a lot of really good seller financing opportunities out there. I've got a few, I got a property under contract a couple weeks ago, which was a 10% down payment, 30-year amortization, 4% interest rate. Like, that's better than I could have gotten before because I'm paying less down. I'm still getting the 30-year am. Where did I find the deal? Facebook. It was just posted in a Facebook group. Now, originally it was posted at worse than that, but you just start having conversations with people. And this leads me back to something I like to talk about, which is virtual networking. Because again, I did everything through the like COVID and stuff like that, all from my phone, from a computer. Don't underestimate the power of virtual networking. And it can be something as simple as talking to somebody in the comment section of a YouTube video. The guy that I talked about earlier, my mentor Mark, to this day I've never met him in person. And when I tell people my mentor, I think a lot of people get the idea that, you know, he held my hand, walked me through deals, showed me how to find them, showed me how to underwrite them. No, none of that happened. I learned all of that on my own. What he did for me was just somebody that I met because I was interviewed on a YouTube channel, he was interviewed on a YouTube channel. He watched my interview, asked for my phone number from the guy who interviewed us both, and we started texting. I met Dion via YouTube interviews months before I met him in person. Dividend Dave back there, who we just gave a book to. I call him Dividend Dave because that's his YouTube handle, not even his real name. His mom didn't name him Dividend. But like, you would be surprised. And when I was a kid and I got made fun of for playing World of Warcraft and going home to talk to my online friends, well, now who's laughing? I got a whole bunch of people who lend me money. I've got private, I have people lining up. I can't get deals fast enough. Mike, we got 60,000, we got 80,000. I'm like, shoot. Okay, this is Michelle. Which one of the YouTube commenters named Michelle is this? But you would be surprised. There's so many opportunities for you to network with people. Don't underestimate anybody. It doesn't matter how small or meaningless that connection could be. My best deal that I bought, a $29,000 house that I put $25,000 worth of work into. So all in for $55,000. It then appraised for $134,000. So I did a cash out refinance, made $13,000 off of it because I left more in than I needed to, and it still cash flows wonderfully. That deal came to me from an Instagram follower who has no profile picture. His name is REI Learner. And I talked to this guy for 6 months when he would ask me some random question and I would respond. And then one day he's like, hey, did you see this deal? It was in some Facebook group. And I looked at it, I was like, no, bro, you don't want this? He's like, nah, I don't want this one. Okay, I'll take it. Like, there's so much you can do in Facebook comment sections, Instagram, and YouTube. And if anybody's interested in investing at a distance, the number one thing I always tell them to do is, okay, let's say you want to invest in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Go on YouTube and type in Tulsa, Oklahoma real estate investor. Who is the local loser like me with 5,000 subscribers, and I actually have time to respond to your comments and answer your DMs. You try messaging a BiggerPockets guy, good luck. It's not gonna happen. They got millions of people messaging them. But when you wanna know about investing in Pierce County, Washington, and you Google that, guess who you find? The freaking stud, or Cody and Christian, who are about to blow up and probably be inaccessible anymore. But like, they're the kings of Grant County in Washington. Like, if you have a question and you comment on their videos, guess what? They respond to their comments. Their hourly rate to consult with you would be $1,000 an hour easily, but you leave a YouTube comment and they answer you for freaking free. You join a live stream, you don't even have to super chat, and you get your questions answered for free. You have all of these resources to talk to people like this who live streams every single week for 3 hours, and you can get any question you want answered for free. And people pay him for coaching. I love you, buddy, but I would not pay you for coaching if I could get you for free.
The great thing about YouTube content creators is we never know when to stop talking.
Yeah, my bad.
And then we're done.
We're done.
Well, guys, thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. I want to give you a hand for
Thank you.
Next up is our one and only Melissa Dorn.
Look at that, we survived.
Oh, man. Perfect time, right?
Make sure your
45
mic's
minutes?
off.
Yeah,
I'll give
I
the
put that
back
mic back in
Put it
there.
in there. So, if they want it, they'll come grab it. Here they comes. We are still live. Let's.
Our mics are off.
Yours mic is off.
Turn it back on.
Cool. Thank you. Let me see if we got just a bunch of people saying hello. Good. Cool.
CEO of Howdy's.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Until our next video, thanks for coming to our Dion Talk.